A very good evening to all our viewers. You're watching World News on CVR English with me, Asma Afreen. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz and French President Emmanuel Macron were seen exiting 10 Downing Street after holding discussions with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The high-level meeting centered on Europe's strategic coordination and ongoing support for Ukraine as the conflict continues to reshape regional security priorities. The four leaders did not take questions from reporters gathered outside the UK Prime Minister's residence, maintaining a coordinated silence as they left the building. Officials say the closed-door session focused on defense commitments, humanitarian assistance and diplomatic alignment among key European partners.
That we stand with Ukraine, and if there's to be a ceasefire, it needs to be a just and lasting ceasefire, and that's why it's so important that we repeatedly set out the principle that matters about Ukraine for Ukraine, and we stand here to support you in the conflict and support you in the negotiations and make sure that this is a just and lasting settlement if we can get that far.
Things which are very important for today, I think unity between Europe and Ukraine, and also unity between Europe, Ukraine and the United States. There are some things which we can't manage without Americans, things which we can't manage without Europe, and that's why we need to make some important decisions.
We all support Ukraine, and we all support peace and peace negotiations to have a sustainable, a robust peace. And I think we have a lot of cards in our hands. The financing and the furniture of equipment and training programs to Ukraine, the fact that Ukraine is resisting in this war, and the fact that the Russian economy is starting to suffer, especially after our latest sanctions and the US sanctions. And now I think the main issue is a convergence between our common positions, Europeans and Ukrainians, and the US to finalize these peace negotiations and re-engage a new phase in the best possible conditions for Ukraine, for the Europeans, and for our collective security.
This could be a decisive time for all of us. So we are trying to continue our support for Ukraine, as you know. On the other hand, we are seeing these talks and negotiations in Moscow and in the US. I'm looking forward to hear from you what the outcome of these talks might be. And we are still and remain strongly behind Ukraine and giving support to your country, because we all know that the destiny of this country is the destiny of Europe. So that's the reason why we are here, trying to figure out what we can do. And nobody should doubt on our support for Ukraine. And this is what we are firmly standing behind, and the outcome is open. I'm skeptical about some of the details which we are seeing in the documents coming from the US side, but we have to talk about that.
Thank you.
Can you all promise Ukraine won't be pressured into a bad deal? Can this peace plan work?
Russian Chief of General Staff Valery Gerasimov has inspected frontline positions following the capture of the Kryanskaya Meviks. At a forward command post, he reviewed the combat task of the center group of forces, including the reported encirclement of Ukrainian units near Dmitrov and ongoing operations along the Depaksis axis. The visit highlights Russia's continued push in the region as the battlefield dynamics evolve.
Добрый день, товарищи офицеры. Войска объединенной группировки продолжают наступление практически на всех направлениях. В ходе доклада Верховному главнокомандующему 1 декабря об освобождении Красноармейска Верховный главнокомандующий обратил внимание и поставил задачу по разгрому подразделений противника в районах восточнее Красноармейска и в Димитрове. На сегодняшний день соединения и воинские части 2-й армии освободили населенные пункты Ровное, Рог и Гнатовку, примыкающих к Красноармейску с восточной стороны. В самом Красноармейске проводится проверка жилых кварталов, оказывается помощь местному населению, эвакуировано в безопасные районы более 200 человек. 5-я отдельная мотострелковая бригада 51-й армии осуществляет уничтожение формирования вооруженных сил Украины, заблокированных в Димитрове. На сегодняшний день южная часть города освобождена и находится под полным нашим контролем. Это составляет более 30% от общего количества зданий в городе. Сегодня в ходе работы подробно рассмотрим результаты выполнения боевых задач войсками группировки «Центр» на этих направлениях, а также уточним порядок дальнейших действий. Приступаем к работе.
John Mayer Schremer argues that the world has moved from unipolarity to multipolarity, with the United States, China and Russia now operating as three great powers, fundamentally changing global strategy. In this address, the renowned realist scholar explains why China, not Russia, poses the primary long-term challenge to the US power, and why Washington's focus on Europe weakens its ability to contain Beijing in East Asia. Mayer Schremer contends that Russia lacks the capability to dominate Europe and warns that maintaining a large US military presence there drains resources needed elsewhere. He also examines how America's unique relationship with Israel shapes US military commitments in the Middle East, further reducing Washington's willingness to act as Europe's security guarantor. According to Mayer Schremer, NATO expansion and the push to bring Ukraine into the alliance were strategic mistakes that provoked a costly war and increased instability on the continent.
States is no longer the only great power in the world. China and Russia are now great powers, which means that American policymakers have to think differently about the world around them. To understand what unipolarity means for Europe, it's essential to consider the distribution of power among the world's three great powers. The United States is still the most powerful country in the world, but China has been catching up and is now widely regarded as a peer competitor. Its huge population, coupled with its truly remarkable economic growth since the early 1990s, has turned it into a potential hegemon in East Asia. For the United States, which is already a regional hegemon in the Western Hemisphere, another great power achieving hegemony either in East Asia or Europe is a deeply worrisome prospect. Remember that the United States entered both world wars to prevent Germany and Japan from becoming regional hegemons in Europe and East Asia, respectively. The same logic applies today to China in East Asia. Russia is the weakest of the three great powers, and contrary to what many Europeans think, I'm sure many Europeans in this institution, it is not a threat to overrun all of Ukraine, much less Eastern Europe. After all, it has spent the past 3.5 years just trying to conquer the eastern 1/5 of Ukraine. The Russian army is not the Wehrmacht, and Russia is not the Soviet Union during the Cold War or the Chinese in East Asia today. In other words, Russia is not a potential head.
Thai residents living along the Thailand-Cambodia border have moved into emergency shelters after clashes between the two countries reignited. Local authorities reported new exchanges of fire in the disputed area, prompting evacuations as a precaution. The renewed tension comes after recent military confrontations and warnings from Thai officials about escalating risk, including reports of cross-border shelling and increased troop activity. This video covers the latest updates, eyewitness accounts, and the situation on the ground as residents seek safety.
เนาะก็เลยว่าต้องให้เอาอันเดียวอย่างนี้นะแต่โรยไอ้นี่ไปเล่นก็เกี่ยวดีกว่าก็แค่นี้เขากาแฟเราได้ยกแก้วยังได้แก้วทำกับข้าวนุ๊ก
Japan has lifted all tsunami warnings after a powerful 7.5 magnitude earthquake struck off the northeastern coast late Monday. At least 30 people were injured and around 90,000 residents were evacuated as authorities warned of potential waves up to 3 meters. Actual tsunami heights range from 20 to 70 centimeters. No major damage has been reported and seismic advisories have now been fully lifted by Japan's meteorological agency.
Bon ben voilà. Arrête de bouger. Merci. Je sais pas comment faire. Bon bah juste le sol qui tremble quoi. Les trucs qui tremblent quoi. En vrai, avec les gens. Eh ben moi non plus, tu crois que je sais où il faut aller? Mais ça se trouve, on est en train de courir pour rien? Oh, ça se trouve très certainement. Ah, ils disent de regarder les news, mais qu'est-ce que je regarde les news? J'ai pas la télé.
The United Nations has condemned Israel after Israeli forces entered the UN RWA compound in East Jerusalem without authorization, removed the UN flag and seized equipment and documents. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said the compound remains inviolable under international law, citing the International Court of Justice ruling reaffirming UN protections.
This compound remains United Nations premises and is inviolable and immune from any other form of interference. As recently confirmed by the International Court of Justice, any executive, administrative, judicial, or legislative action against United Nations property and assets is prohibited by the Convention on Privileges and Immunities of the United Nations.
Mindy Wasser.
The Secretary General urges Israel to immediately take all necessary steps to help restore, preserve, and uphold the inviolability of UNRWA premises and refrain from taking any further action with regard to UNRWA premises in line with Israel's obligations under the Charter of the UN and its other obligations under international law, including those concerning privileges and immunities of the United Nations.
Opposition presidential candidate Bobi Wine, leader of Uganda's National Unity Platform, held a major campaign rally in Kampala on December 8. Thousands of supporters gathered to hear his address on unemployment and economic liberation. The rally turned tense when police deployed tear gas, dispersing crowds. Despite the disruption, Bobi Wine thanked his supporters and vowed to continue his campaign ahead of next month's general elections.
To the international community, you all are watching what is happening in Uganda. The East African community is watching what is happening in Uganda. The African Union is watching, and the United Nations is watching. And I wonder whether you are waiting to see a massacre in Uganda so you can act or you can speak out. We are aware that the regime is provoking the citizens so that the citizens of Uganda can respond with throwing rocks in order for the regime to get justification to massacre them. We have been provoked many times, but like I've always guided that we must not respond to them with the indiscipline and with the violence that they made upon us. I thank you very much. Let us keep it that way. Let us keep disciplined because the world is watching us.
Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara delivered a major speech marking the first anniversary of Bashar al-Assad's fall, saying Syria has moved from pity to admiration and pride. Shara praised the country's transformation over the past year and called it a historic break from a dark chapter. After rebels seized Damascus in an 8-day offense, this is what the president said.
كلمة فخامة السيد أحمد الشرع رئيس الجمهورية العربية السورية. وتغيرت حكايات الناس عن سوريا وأهلها من الإشفاق إلى الإعجاب والاعتزاز، وأدركت الأبصار عمود الكتاب يضيء نوره من جديد، كل ذلك في عام واحد لله الحمد. كلمة فخامة السيد أحمد الشرع رئيس الجمهورية العربية السورية. الثامن من ديسمبر.
A Russian Soyuz MS-27 capsule carrying Roscosmos cosmonaut Sergei Ryzhkov has landed safely outside Zhezkazgan, Kazakhstan. Recovery teams reached the landing site shortly after touchdown. The return marks the completion of Ryzhkov's mission aboard the International Space Station, concluding another chapter in Russia's long-running human space flight program.
Спускаемого аппарата непосредственно вот этот элемент, то есть он уже никак воздействовать не будет. То есть это не настолько сильно, но стоять рядом с днищем, конечно же, нельзя. Вот.
Но мы видим, как непросто на самом деле, да, вот именно этот этап после открытия крышки.
Конечно, там необходимо вот все подготовить, помочь кому-то, потому что особенно после длительного полета, да, это даже не полгода, это уже 8 месяцев, там и когда год был, да, Олег Кононенко и Николай Чуб, конечно, но вот тут вот сейчас вот они, получается, вот Алексей Зубрицкий, он как висит на ремнях, да, получается, вот, то есть тоже нужно понимать, что хочется поскорее им выйти.
На воздушных сил России, с которым и Сергей Рыжиков, традиционно встречаю, который там служил.
Вот сейчас извлекают Сергея Николаевича.
Families in Ecuador marched through the Guacul to march 1 year since the disappearance and killings of 4 boys aged 11 to 15 who were found burned and shot after allegedly being detained by military patrols in December 2024. Protesters demanded justice as 17 military personnel face trial. Amnesty International has linked the case to broader concerns about forced disappearances under Ecuador's militarized security strategy.
Gracias, gracias. Yo lo único que pido es justicia, por favor, que se haga justicia. Queremos saber la verdad. ¿Por qué le hicieron eso a nuestros hijos? Ha sido un año muy duro para nosotros, muy duro.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has sent condolences to Russian President Vladimir Putin following the death of Alexander Ivanovich Matasorga. Russia's ambassador to North Korea, state media described his passing as a heart-rending event and a major loss for both nations. Russia's foreign ministry confirmed that Matasorga, 70, died on December 6, praising him as an outstanding diplomat and patriot.
김정은 동지께서는 조선에서 조선민주주의인민공화국 주재 러시아聯邦특명전권대사 알렉산드르 이와노비치 마제고라 동지가 뜻밖의 별세한 것과 관련하여 조선민주주의인민공화국 정부를 대표하여 그리고 자신의 이름으로 푸틴 동지와 러시아聯邦지도부, 유가족들에게 심심한 애도와 위문을 표하셨습니다. 김정은 동지께서는 저로 두 나라 관계 발전이 중대한 역사적 국면에 들어선 지금과 같은 시기에 마제고라 대사를 뜻밖의 이룬 것은 참으로 비통한 일이며 러시아 정부와 인민뿐 아니라 자신과 우리 인민에게 있어서 커다란 상실로 된다고 하셨습니다.
알렉산드르 마제고라 동지와 대사관 주요 성원들이 정중히 조선민주주의인민공화국 국가수반계 혁명정권 대사는 러시아 연방 기권위가 진정됐습니다. 가옥을 아로새기신 경애하는 김정은 동지를 러시아 연방 대사관의 전체 성원들은 대사관 주요 성원들이 정중히 조선민주주의인민공화국 국가수반계 혁명정권 대사는 러시아 연방 기권위가 진정됐습니다. 가옥을 아로새기신 경애하는 김정은 동지를 러시아 연방 대사관의 전체 성원들은 다함없는 흠모심을 안고 뜨겁게 환송해 드렸습니다. 담화를 나누시었습니다. 무로브 동지는
That's all for the world news today. Keep watching CVR English.